I looked up from the paper and took one last look at the man I once knew, but he was gone, leaving me with nothing but my tears to bring me back to the beginning. My name is Stan Shipman. I've been married to Lucy Dalton for 5 years now. We were high school sweethearts. I honestly believed we were meant to be together, and we got married right after high school, and I've been working as a welder for as long as I can remember, and ever since I was very young my father has been a highly experienced welder who passed on his knowledge to me, and I have been welding metal since I was old enough to safely operate a welder, and although as a child I dreamed of going to construction sites with my father, company rules and insurance policies would not allow me to do so. After high school, I received formal education in the field of welding, but quickly lost interest in the classes, as I was already very proficient in the subject. After impressing all of my teachers, I received my certification and began working immediately, and because of my extensive experience in fabrication, installation and welding, I was able to command a good salary, especially for out-of-state jobs that required traveling. Despite this, I still had a deep affection for her and willingly supported her through college. Her parents doubted my ability to finance her through school without going into debt, but I proved them wrong when she graduated from college, and they were not only proud of me, but also proud of her for graduating without student loan debt dragging down her future. For the first few months everything was bearable, but as time went on it got worse and worse, all because some of her female coworkers were having a negative impact on her. When I raised the issue with Lucy, she simply suggested that we meet up on a Saturday, saying that she should be with her friends. As time went on she started staying longer and longer, sometimes coming back early on a Saturday morning, and when I tried to call her to find out how she was feeling the call always went to voicemail. She explained that she and a few of the girls in the office liked to relax over a drink and sometimes dance. 00. But you were what's going on? Are you seeing someone else? I asked her of course not, and she replied with a deep sigh that if you really need to know sometimes we have a bite to eat after that. Yes, but before 4 a.m. she admitted that this behavior has to stop. I said I don't mind you spending an evening with them, but I can't help but feel you are taking advantage of me. I said she apologized and offered to stop seeing them on Fridays. A few weeks went by and everything seemed to be going well, but unfortunately Lucy soon fell back into her old habits and she resumed her weekly walks on Wednesdays and Fridays, and I realized I had to find out the truth. After work on Friday, I packed up and headed to the club where she was meeting her friends. The place looked more like a bar with a DJ and a dance floor than a traditional club. Also, she was wearing a much more revealing outfit than the one she had worn earlier, and they were so engrossed in their relationship with each other that they didn't even notice me walking up to their table. My answer made Lucy look at me in surprise. This was an unexpected scene I had encountered in this bar. Are you going to introduce me to your friends? My eyes fell on her bare left hand, which had no wedding or engagement ring on it. I asked her, aren't you forgetting something? The man sitting next to her stood up. He puffed out his chest, extended his hand openly and introduced himself as Jake Rollins. He mentioned that he and Lucy were close co-workers. Determined not to let him mock me, I noticed the pain in his expression and I held my tongue. I was about to ask your wife to dance, if you don't mind. He nodded understandingly and Lucy got up from her seat. I took Jack's usual seat and asked for a beer as most of the others had already left. She took a sip of her drink and said that her colleagues appreciated her work and had high hopes for her future. She added that I didn't like her arrogant attitude and I wondered what false information she might have given. I replied that I never said I wanted to control Lucy, but I am her husband and if something is affecting our marriage I have to know what the truth is. Stan Marie replied that Lucy needs to broaden her horizons. All she knows is the university and you. Do you think she needs to broaden her horizons and try something new? I take my wedding vows seriously and I believe Lucy does too. Do you have any experience with marriage? I'm asking. I noticed she doesn't have a ring on her finger. Let me hazard a guess. Your husband found out about your infidelity, didn't he? Lucy doesn't belong to anyone and I expect you to respect that. I insisted. She giggled. Sure, go on living in your fantasies, she replied. Just then Jack and Lucy came back from the dance floor. I got up to make room for Lucy and put her in between me and Mary. I took my seat before Jack sat down next to her. I noticed that he didn't look very happy about it, but I didn't care. Lucy said, you're a welder. How much do welders get paid these days? Murray asked. I was $15 an hour, but I actually make over $35 an hour, especially when I work underwater, I replied. Did Lucy tell you I financed her college tuition? I added, wow, I didn't know elders made that much money. Jack marveled, obviously I'm doing something wrong. I bet you have a lot of women around when you travel. Jack elbowed me in embarrassment. I replied, no, in fact I work long hours on construction sites and I take my marriage vows seriously, like Mary said. I'm convinced of that, Jack said smugly. This conversation annoyed me. I turned to my wife and asked, did you drive here today? I got up and said to Lucy, I accidentally spilled my almost full cold beer on Jack's thigh and wet the crotch of his khaki trousers. Oops, sorry, looks like you're going to have to change your trousers when you get home. I growled, and when he saw the determination in my eyes he backed away. That's a good one, I told him. I looked at my wife. Are you coming? I'm right behind you, she replied softly to me. I could feel Mary's eyes on me. If glances could kill, I'd be underground by now. I left the pub without looking back. Lucy pulled up to the door a few minutes later. Well done. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and waited for her in the living room. Her question caught me off guard and I hurriedly shook my head, denying that I had any ulterior motives. No, I just wanted a beer, I replied, trying to look calm. In fact, I was shocked to see her with her colleagues, as I knew I had just lied to her for the first time. I was sad when I noticed you had taken off your wedding ring. You seemed ashamed to be married to me. Is that what you thought? No, of course not, she reassured me. I have to work closely with these people, especially Jack, who I work with the most. Lucy started talking about Mary. I asked what her role was as a guide, as she was higher up in the company than I was. Does that include marriage advice? I asked. What do you mean? She asked innocently. As you dance with Jack, she lectured me on the importance of expanding my horizons and taking risks. I abruptly changed the subject and asked, no. She replied, no. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying. I asked again, no, and she answered quickly. I asked her, you and I have been together since 6th grade, have I ever cheated on you? And when I'm not with you I work all the time, and I wasn't kidding when I told Jack I work long hours, sometimes 16 hours a day. You know it's true. How do you think you pay for college? So you can go and tell Mary to stop talking rubbish about things she doesn't know anything about, I said threateningly. Are you being rude to her? Lucy asked. No, not at all, but I can't stand the nonsense she's been feeding you. Do you know she's been divorced twice for cheating on her husband? My words startled Lucy. How did you know that? There was curiosity in her voice. I asked her, did you do something wrong? Stan, I didn't, she assured me. It's easy, I continued. I like being with them. She admitted. I like being with you, I replied. Do you think you could spend more time with your husband? That's okay, you know I've only dreamed of 3 things in my life. I said what she wanted. The first was to marry you, the second was to be the best welder in the city, and the third was to start a family with you. Lucy playfully suggested that I would love to, I replied, and we rushed into the bedroom and then spent the night in each other's arms. Over the next few months life seemed to calm down. Lucy stayed at home every Friday and I made a conscious effort to give her more attention and affection. One Friday night I came home to a dimly lit house, candles lit on the dining room table, and the smell of lasagna in the air that suggested Lucy was up to something. I turned to see my beautiful wife in the shortest skirt I'd ever seen, flaunting her legs, and knowing I couldn't resist her. She wrapped her arms around me and bit my lips in a deep kiss. Do you like what you see? She cooed. I just nodded in agreement. Oh yes, I replied. I was thrilled as I admired her amazing body. This night was supposed to be unforgettable, so why did I have to ask that question? After washing up, I returned to the dining room to see that Lucy had served her favorite lasagna and a couple of glasses of wine. I don't know which is more tempting, your lasagna, I said, taking a seat as she giggled and joined me at the table. As I finished my meal a strange feeling came over me and I tried to stand up but found I was so dizzy I almost tripped. When I woke up I found myself in my bedroom, naked and tied to a chair. Confusion and anger washed over me and I demanded to know what had happened. Desperately trying to get up from the chair, I asked, what is this nonsense? Mary replied, I'm terribly sorry, dear, what kind of mercy is that? Frustrated, I asked, I want you to admire your wife's height. Mary calmly explained, did you drug me and tie me to this chair? I accused. Of course, Mary admitted it. I warned me that you would never voluntarily agree to this, so I gave her something to put you to sleep for a while so you could watch your wife cheat on you and you couldn't stop her," Marie said sarcastically. I stared at Lucy angrily, "Which I never had. How could you agree to this? Do you understand where this leads?" I asked. "I'm sorry, but Marie insisted that this was the only way out. Please believe me, this will not affect our relationship in any way. This is just physical contact. I still love you." "I have made it very clear that I will not tolerate betrayal of any kind," I said, trying to reason with her. "What is this contraption you have me imprisoned in? Get me out of this chair and remove this device and our relationship will be over. Please give him a chance. It's only for one night and I'll release you when we're done." "Lucy, please," I shook my head in disbelief. "You're not as stupid as you look." "Lucy, now release me," I said. Mary walked up to me with something in her hand. Before I could react, she shoved a gag in my mouth and told me to silent. She grinned and teased me to keep quiet. I struggled desperately trying to break the knots, but to no avail. Mary laughed maliciously and left the room, leaving me alone with Jack and the other man in her office, who watched me with interest. Well, this little devil is ready to start. Oh, this might cheer you up." Jack chuckled as he leaned back and gave me a hard smack on me in the face with a hard punch, and then another one just to be on the safe side. Jack said, pulling Lucy's skirt away from her, and for the next hour the three of them happily did everything they could, and Jack wrote it all down. He said my wife belongs to him now and he can come and do whatever he likes whenever he likes. Mary said as she stood up and looked Lucy in the eye, "Let him go when I'm gone. Call me if he gives you any trouble." Lucy nodded her head in agreement. After Mary had gone, Lucy pulled the gag out of my mouth and cut the rope that tied me to the chair before she could speak. I knew that what she and her company were doing was not only wrong but extremely illegal. Despite her desperate attempts to retrieve the phone, I managed to wrestle it from her and place it safely in my pocket. I said threateningly, "You heard what Jack and Mary said. They mean business." Lucy threatened. "They'd better not mess with me," I warned. She hesitantly started to get dressed. Lucy saw the seriousness in my expression and knew better than to test my strength whilst she was quietly getting dressed, so quickly obeyed. I felt her phone vibrate in my pocket, and when I pulled it out I saw a message from Mary. She asked me if everything was okay. I replied that he wasn't thrilled but he would do it and hopefully fool her. I put the phone back in my pocket and was interrupted by the sound of sirens in the street. Lucy walked into the front room and that's when the police arrived. The officer recording my statement quickly called an ambulance and took a sample from my face, carefully placing it in an evidence bag. After a brief conversation outside, both officers returned and the second cuffed Lucy from the bedroom and cuffed her hands behind her back, tears streaming down her face as she pleaded, "Please don't let them take me away. It was just a joke." The officer who took the statement told me that Lucy had been arrested for unlawful detainment, use of a prohibited substance and coercion to have an intimate relationship, and that they recommended that I go to the hospital to be examined to determine what drugs had been used on me. He handed me a business card with the name and a phone number of an attorney in the district attorney's office. I had already called her and she said she would meet you at the hospital. He thankfully told me I went with the paramedics and they quickly examined me on the way. They examined me in the A&E room, taking samples of my face, sorting me out, and taking blood and urine samples. She asked me if I was feeling better, just a little tired, and they gave me painkillers. I replied, "Mr. Shipman, I was briefed by the officer who brought you in. I voluntarily filed for an order of protection and she said thank you for your support. Do you think it will change anything?" I asked. "It's hard to say. It might help but there are no guarantees," she replied. I nodded my head in understanding that if it helps at all they will be detained at least until Monday morning, at which point they will be charged. "As long as you don't make any stupid decisions," she said firmly, "but if you don't intend to remain married to your wife, you should consider hiring a divorce lawyer." I was told that they were going to keep you overnight for observation, which was probably for the best since your flat was now considered a crime scene and they would need some time to thoroughly search everything and gather evidence. Linda asked me if I had any weapons and I shook my head and replied that I didn't, and I told her that my brother had decided to get rid of all his handguns after he accidentally shot himself in the leg with his father's .22 caliber pistol. Linda said, "I understand but I have the right to defend myself in my own home," I replied. Then the officer asked me if I had any illegal drugs. I shook my head. "I didn't but I can't speak for my wife," I admitted. The next morning after I had breakfast my parents came to see me. They sat quietly and I told them all the details of what had happened. When I finished, my father's anger overflowed and he asked me, "What are you going to do next?" "I am going to divorce this woman." He suggested that I could find a good divorce lawyer. I replied that I knew of a few. "Let me find one." He assured me that when you are ready to leave the hospital, call me and I will make sure you get home safely. We all laughed and then they said their goodbyes. Mom hugged me before they left. Lucy's parents came and we've always had a great relationship. They're like a second parent to me. Lucy's father said. I just nodded my head in agreement. I couldn't live with the consequences of her behavior and I confessed to her mother that I understood how you all felt and apologized on her behalf. Her mother asked if Lucy got out of jail she would need to find a place to stay. The ASA is seeking an order of protection so she can't go back to the flat. I said that she could stay with us and her mother suggested that. Thank you, to which I replied gratefully, and after exchanging goodbyes, they left. I made my way in my wheelchair to the loading bay where my dad's car was waiting. I got in and we drove to the flat. My dad walked me to the door and then said goodbye to me. "Remember, I can call you anytime if you need anything." He said goodbye and "Thank you, Dad." As soon as I got into the flat I checked my surroundings. After the police had searched our house I realized that it was going to take a very long time to get everything all sorted out. The number was listed as private, which made the message even more mysterious. The voice sounded familiar to me and after listening to it a few more times I realized it was a quote from the old film Rocky. A few minutes after I realized this, the doorbell rang and I looked through the peephole to see an attractive young brunette standing outside the door. In a sudden flash of inspiration, I took my mobile phone out of my shirt pocket, activated the camera, switched on the video recording function, then put it back in my pocket and opened the door, leaving the door chain on just in case. I hesitated and asked her, "Are you alone?" "Yes, I am alone." She confirmed my identity. I closed the door gently, removed the chain and then invited her inside. Curiously, she handed me an envelope from Manila. I asked what was inside. Holly replied softly, "Please open it." I carefully opened the envelope and looked inside to see a couple of photos. I placed the envelope on the coffee table and then quickly went to the kitchen to get a pair of latex gloves. I didn't want to leave my fingerprints in the living room. I pulled out the photos and was shocked by what I saw. The photo showed the dead man on his knees with his hands tied behind his back. In another photo the same man was photographed from a different angle. "That's my husband Brian. Did you report it?" I asked Holly and she nodded solemnly. "Yes, the authorities admitted he had hurt himself." I was shocked. "Why am I asking? Don't you understand?" She began. "The company we work for has a powerful network of connections in the shadow world. They have a lot of influence over the police," she said. "Now I understand. Is this a setup by Jack?" I asked her. She just shrugged. "It's hard to say. Maybe he's behind it," she suggested. "Then why do you still work for this company?" I asked her. She sighed. "I had no other choice," she admitted. "Let me guess, you're not just a lawyer's secretary, are you?" I asked her and she nodded solemnly. "They treated you the same way they treated me, except that my husband got his revenge on Jack and paid for it in full. My duties include meeting the needs of the lawyers and their clients," she said. "What on earth was Mary doing in this situation?" I asked her and she replied that she was actually the manager who coordinated all of our tasks and then Lucy was added to her register and I confirmed that yes, she did. When I opened the envelope I found a slip of paper with letters that looked like they had been cut out of magazines and newspapers and glued to the paper. I almost laughed out loud but managed to hold it back. I asked her and she shook her head. "No, someone left it in my flat this morning with a note for me to deliver it to this address," and she said, "Are you ready to tell the DA about this?" I asked almost everyone above the middle level and she replied and I nodded my head in understanding. "Okay Holly, thanks for bringing this to my attention." I opened the door for her and after I looked her over carefully as she left the room to make sure no one else was behind her and closed the door, I felt that the situation was becoming more difficult because of the voicemail and the impending threat, even though I had decided to get a divorce. Although I had already decided to divorce Lucy, these new developments had upped the ante considerably. I shuddered at the thought of what I was planning to do to Jack, because I knew Lucy would soon want to break up with me. Her voice was calm and quiet as I told her about the contents of the voicemail and the envelope that had just been delivered, emphasizing that this incident was a turning point and that I needed you to bring this to me immediately. I hastily packed up what should have been enough for a few days and threw them into the back of the Ford. Remembering the cage Lucy had used on me the night before, I grabbed it and loaded it into the truck. Without hesitation he agreed to my request and said that the work was done and you had a lot of holiday left, so you would need as much time as possible to deal with this. Thank you for your understanding. I made sure everything was organized, locked up the flat and set off. Less than half an hour later I was at Linda's flat and her reaction to the photos and note I had brought with me was shocking. I handed her my phone and asked her to save the video. As she watched the video I realized that I still had Lucy's phone in my pocket. I handed her the phone and she asked me what it was. She asked what it was and I explained that it was Lucy's phone and I put it in my pocket, and then Jack attacked me and until today I had completely forgotten about it, Linda added. She looked at me and asked me, what are you going to do? I'm going to go away for a while, I replied, and she suggested that I either take protection or join the witness protection program. How about that? I of course declined the offer as I was worried that Jay and his friends would find out where I was, so I just said no thanks and left without deciding on a destination. I knew I had to be careful because I could easily get into trouble. After midnight, an idea struck me and I decided to stop at the recreation area to make a phone call. I hoped it wasn't too late. Luckily it wasn't too late. Yes, the call came through helicopter. Dave, it's me, Stan, I said. Dave is an old friend of mine. I've worked with him on a number of projects and we've always got on well. Stan, the old devil, what's the matter? Dave shouted. I'm in a bit of trouble. I want to know. I said. No problem, mate, make yourself at home. Do me a favor and pick up a couple of beers on the way, if you don't mind. No problem, see you in a few hours. I also decided to get a coffee and a couple of packets of cigarettes and then hit the road. Dave Brolin is about 15 years older than me and is professionally related to my father, so he and I have crossed paths a few times, and he stayed with us a couple of times when he was working near our house, and over time he became my older brother. I learned a lot of valuable lessons working with him in my father's shop, and I saw that he faced considerable difficulties as a child when his father, who worked in a shipyard and was exposed to asbestos on a regular basis, eventually died from complications related to the development of the disease in his body. After his father's death, his sister Beverly took over the care of their mother, who had died of stomach cancer about a year earlier. By the time Bev and I met again, I had fallen in love with Lucy and we had a great relationship, more like a sibling relationship. We used to make fun of each other. Dave, like me, married young but eventually divorced when he found out his wife was with a colleague. About 2:30 a.m. Dave smiled and handed me a packet of cigarettes before opening the door and helping me carry the rest of my stuff inside. I blinked and realized it was Beverly. She didn't look anything like the skinny girl I remembered. Her legs were long, her breasts fuller and her hair almost down her back. She replied sarcastically, "What are you doing here so early in the morning? Did Lucy catch you cheating and kick you out?" I nodded and grabbed 3 beers and walked towards the front room, handing one to Dave before turning to Beverly and flirting. "Are you sure you're old enough to drink?" "I admit it, but we're all adults and practically family. You could have just told us." Dave took a deep breath and said brotherly, I retold the whole story of Lucy Marie and Jack and then showed them the video of me meeting Holly. When I finished, my friends were dumbfounded and silent. Bloody hell. Dave took a sip of his beer and then finally spoke up. "Do you think they know where you were there?" I shook my head. I hadn't noticed any vehicles chasing me. Luckily we were at the top of the hill and we could see someone coming up from here. "I still have the gun I bought from your dad after Mikey's accident. I hope you remember how to shoot it," Dave asked me. I nodded. "Yes, but I haven't picked up a weapon since then." Luckily for Mikey, he only suffered minor injuries and made a full recovery. My father was so remorseful about what happened that he decided to get rid of all his handguns and never buy any new ones. I shook my head. "No, I didn't tell anyone where I was, but maybe I should tell the ASA," I replied. "Just remember to be careful," Beverly reminded me. I didn't intend to come here until I was on the road. Dave said that they were advised not to use their mobile phones if at all possible, and that it would be a good idea to switch them off and remove the batteries in case they had a tracker on them. Beverly asks, "Yes, they will be arraigned on Monday," and I confirm that the DA wants the judge to hold them without bail, but listening to Holly, I'm not sure that's going to happen. Dave said, "I hope the situation will be resolved by then." I said, "I hope so. Like I said, you can stay here," Dave suggested. "Thank you. I really appreciate it," I replied gratefully. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know, Dave said confidently. Dave looked at Beverly, a smile on his face. I'm sure Bev will be able to take care of you. You're our guest. Your parents have always treated us very well. I hope you like omelets and hash browns because that's what I'm going to make, she added, giving me a playful look. Breakfast of champions sounds great. I smiled and replied. Beverly waved goodbye and went upstairs. After her bedroom door closed, Dave and I went out to the backyard for a smoke and to catch up. I asked how she was doing. I thought she had settled down and got married and had kids. Dave shook his head and said no, she hadn't been able to find anyone she could really get close to. Dave looked at me seriously and said, good enough for you, silly. She's had a crush on you for a long time. I was stunned. This was impossible, I exclaimed. Absolutely not. Dave confirmed, she kept it from you because Lucy didn't want to be the reason you guys broke up. Do you think she still has feelings for me? I asked. I heard her say your name in her sleep, Dave said. You know too much, I replied. Dave just laughed and took a sip of his beer. Yeah, I remember that, I replied. Look, I don't mind you being with her as long as you do me a favor, okay? Promise me you won't hurt her. I care about my sister and I know deep down you do too. I just don't want to break her heart. If it doesn't work out, she'll break. If it doesn't work out, Dave admitted that. I reassured him I forgot about Lucy. Don't worry about it. He nodded. Okay, I guess I'm going to bed. See you in the morning. He got up and stubbed out his cigarette in the bottle next to him and went upstairs. I finished my cigarette quickly and climbed into bed. A few minutes later, I took a quick shower as per my usual routine and got dressed and went downstairs. In the process of getting dressed, I took the ring off my finger and threw it on the kitchen dresser. She was wearing a short t-shirt and shorts. Her long hair was tied back in a ponytail with light bangs framing her face. She was so beautiful. I can't believe I hadn't noticed that before. I said it smelled so good. She grinned. I'm glad you think so. The cowboy coffee is ready if you want some. Do you still like butter pecan cream? Do you still like pecan cream? She smiled and said, come on, have a seat. I sat down at the table with Dave, who was already sitting engrossed and reading the Sunday paper. He said, handing me the paper, the article was vague, not naming names or providing details. It was standard news that only someone familiar with the situation could read. Beverly handed him a list of necessary items, which he put in his pocket, and then headed for the exit with his keys. I turned to Beverly and asked, would you like to help pack the crockery? I nodded. I've made it clear that I won't tolerate betrayal and I'll bring this to an end well, she replied with a slight smile. I'm glad to see you're still hanging in there, she added. How are you doing? Beverly eyed the plate and said, is there someone special in your life? I asked. There used to be, she replied. Sadly, he was drafted into the army. After my father died, my mother needed my help to make ends meet. I got a job as a waitress, as she only had her father's debts and some social security. Beverly said sadly that I was really sorry to hear this news, and I sympathized by saying, please don't do this. I don't regret giving my time for her, to which she replied, I just hope that when I get to be her age there will be someone nearby who will lend a helping hand. She explained that after her mother's death they had to sell the house and most of her possessions to cover the remaining expenses, and with the help of her father's pension and savings they paid off all remaining debts. I now work at a local McDonald's and make enough money to cover my expenses, plus I take business courses in the evenings. When I told Dave about this, he responded enthusiastically, and then he told me that he was thinking of starting a manufacturing business and wanted me to be the accountant. That would be great, she said happily, and I replied with a smile as we lapsed into silence, and I couldn't help but marvel at her, and that's when I really saw her inner and outer beauty. I'm not making fun of you, she whispered, I just can't help admiring you. I replied, you gave up your life for your parents, turned down Dave's offer of college tuition, and now you're forging your own path in life. She shook her head. You were blinded by Lucy, so I can't blame you, she said. Yes, you're probably right, I admitted as she finished washing the dishes. She wiped her hands at the sink and turned to face me. She used you, she said. I realized she was right. You were blinded by her, she confused you, you would have done anything for her. She got everything she wanted, diplomas, new cars, expensive things, and you paid for it all, Beverly said angrily. I'm glad she's in jail because if she was here I would have taught her a good lesson, and I think you would too. I asked her, will you forgive her tears and take her back? I shook my head and said no. She threw her clothes on the floor and exposed her body to me for the first time. She slowly walked up to me and put her arms around me and gave me the most passionate kiss. At that moment we made love. She whispered, "I love you too, Beverly. I want to be with you forever," to which I replied, "That sounds nice, but I don't think my brother would approve." She teased me. I giggled and pulled her to me for another deep kiss. "Don't worry," she reassured me. "I'm on the pill, and to be honest, I don't mind you getting me pregnant. I'll be happy to have children for you." I smiled. "I'll definitely keep that in mind." She suggested I go and have a shower. "Yes, I'll be back in a minute," I replied. "Great," she said. "By the way, we usually have a barbecue on Sundays, weather permitting. Do you like venison?" "Yes, I do," I replied. "I really like venison, but the last time I had venison was many years ago," Beverly said with emotion. "You must be a woman of tough character, and I must say, I am impressed with your skills. I remember seeing Dave's flintlock rifle and being taken aback by the size of it. It looked to be at least 49 inches long. Did you load it yourself?" I laughed and asked, "What else haven't you done?" She teased, "I haven't restored the transmission on Dave's truck yet." I rushed upstairs and jumped in the shower. I was soon joined by Beverly and we kissed passionately under the jets of hot water. I wanted to continue, just until bedtime tonight. "By the way, you're going to be sleeping with me from now on. My bed is much bigger than the one you have in your room," Beverly said. "Wouldn't Dave be upset?" "I need to call the DA and tell him where I am," I said, and Beverly pointed to the cordless phone on the counter. "Come on, use this one," she said, and I picked up the phone and called, almost forgetting it was long distance. She said, "Linda, this is Stan Shipman. I just wanted to get in touch with you to let you know where I was, and thank God you called me." I turned my phone off just in case, and I added that I would keep you informed of all developments as best as I could, and Linda assured me that I had been contacted by the feds and it looked like they were looking into the company your wife worked for, and I told her a little bit about you and that I thought that she would be the best person to solve this problem, and Linda proudly said, "Thank you, I will be in touch with her," and I happily agreed. Dave was back by this time and I went outside to help him bring in the groceries. When he was done he said, "I called your parents and they were worried about you. I told them you would be staying with us for a while. Thank you." We grilled meat on the patio and enjoyed an al fresco dinner. After dinner we all helped clean up. Dave and I took a break and drank beer and smoked cigarettes while Beverly cleaned up. "She was his sister." "I think so," I replied. "Do you love her?" He asked. "Yes, I love her." I confirm. "It's fine. It's time for you to move on." He smiled and said, "Beverly is a strong woman and can take care of herself. I just don't want her to get hurt." I held his hand tightly and felt welcomed and accepted. "Just don't disturb my sleep all night." "Okay." Dave smiled and I smiled and nodded my head in agreement. "I promise I'll do my best in the future." In that moment I felt a peace and contentment I hadn't felt in a long time. "What were you thinking?" Bev's gentle voice broke the silence. "About the future," I replied. She seemed interested. "What are your goals in life?" She asked me. "I know that nowadays women can strive for the top and break through the glass ceiling," she said. "But it's not about me. I'm not looking for a career or anything like that. What I really need is a devoted husband who loves me as much as I love him and a family that I can raise. As for my course, it's mostly for Dave, and he'll need help when his career flourishes." Beverly shared her feelings with me, and as for me, "I feel the same way you do." When she asked me about my job, I added painfully, "I admit that I love it, but it often takes me away for long periods of time." I looked at her in silence before replying, "I wish I had known Lucy before I met you," I admitted regretfully, to which she replied, "So do I, but we can't change the past. As long as we are together we can overcome anything, and I will be there for you no matter what happens." The next morning Beverly woke up earlier than everyone else, and after preparing breakfast she hurried upstairs to get ready for work. Before she left she kissed me on the cheek and said that she had to go to school in the evening after work. She smiled and said, "I love you too." I appreciated her words and replied, "What about me? Can I get a kiss?" Dave laughed and Beverly smiled as she leaned over and pecked him on the cheek, and then again, like sisters. I dialed the number and a friendly female voice answered the phone. It was the law office of Bernice Goodwin. I introduced myself and asked to speak to Bernice and mentioned that she was expecting my call. "Yes, Mr. Shipman," Bernice replied. "Linda update me and I have been waiting for your call. Although I would have preferred to meet in person for an initial consultation, I know that this time it is not possible, but it is not scary. At the moment we can resolve most of this online. Please share your story with me and don't miss out on anything. I replied, I'm sure we can do it. Charging your wife with a criminal offense should work in your favor, but I would need to check your financial records. Do you own any property such as a house? I shook my head no, we live in a flat. I told her okay, I will go through the details and start the proceedings. Can you give me your email address? She asked. Of course I can. I replied, very well, I will send you some necessary documents. One of them is a contract that requires your electronic signature and the other one is a checklist. Please complete these tasks as soon as possible. In addition, I will need an advance payment from you. She asks if you can do it today. Yes, I can. I replied, very well, I will send this to you, and as soon as everything is ready, I will arrange for the documents to be handed over to you. At the end of the call, I opened my laptop and checked my emails. Unsurprisingly, Bernice sent me an email with 2 documents attached. I opened the contract, signed the text electronically, and sent it back with the receipt to make sure she had received it. I closed and canceled Lucy's credit card, but mine was still open because I had just used it to pay the commission. By the time I had completed all these tasks, it was afternoon and Dave took me to his workshop where he was working on a trailer for a local farmer. The phone rang and Dave took the phone off the extension cord in the workshop and handed it to me. It's your attorney, he told me, and when I picked up the phone I heard Linda's voice. It's Linda Caraway. Unfortunately, the judge set a minimum bail for them and now they are free, she said. How is that possible? Linda said, great, I sighed. So what do we do now? I asked. You will stay where you are. I will do everything I can, and if you need anything just call me, okay? Linda asked okay, and I replied. We ended the conversation and I handed the phone back to Dave and he asked what was the bad news. I took the phone from him and dialed my father's number. He answered the phone after the second ring. Dad, it's Stan. I said, how are you, son? He asked, I'm fine. I just wanted to let you know that the judge has released Lucy and her friends. Maybe you should be on your guard. I told him I had a feeling they might come looking for me. I said worriedly, don't worry, we won't give them any information. Are you still at John Harrison's? I suddenly realized that Lucy and her friends were probably there looking for me. I am staying in a motel about 50 miles south from your house. I told him, okay, please make sure you are safe. He replied, I am fine, but I will be out of here in the morning to go east. I will keep you posted on where I am. I assured him, okay, let me know where you end up. He asked me, of course. I asked her, she's busy in the bathroom right now. Dad explained. I listened and heard some faint voices. Please tell her I'm fine. I love her. I said I will, son. His father promised. His voice was strained. I hope he's safe. We'll talk again, okay? He said I will. Dad, I love you. I said I love you too, son. He replied and hung up. I was hoping that they would believe the story I told my father and that maybe we had a few more hours of peace before they figured out what was going on. But my interlocutor insisted that we stay together, stay where we were, and he ordered me to get myself cleaned up and go into town to talk to the sheriff. Stay where you are, okay? I nodded my head in agreement, realizing the gravity of the situation. A couple of hours later he left the house, and headed for town. Shortly after he left, Linda called me back. Stan, you were right, she said eagerly. Lucy Marie, Jack, and a couple of their associates, after the hearing they found your parents. They tied them up and threatened them and demanded to know your whereabouts. We notified the authorities and put them on the wanted list. One of their associates is now in custody, but he's not cooperating. Linda said, do you have any idea where they might be going? I asked. I'm not sure, but I don't think they bought your story. Linda replied, I asked to speak to my father on the phone and in a few seconds he was on the line. Stan, I don't think they bought your story, he said. Are you okay? I asked with concern. We're fine now, but Lucy and her friends might be going to you, he warned. How did you know? I heard Lucy talking, he explained. Asked Linda to notify the sheriff. He said I would. Dad, you be careful too, I assured him, and then the phone was handed over to D. Linda, where in the world are you? What's this? She asked me eagerly. I told her where I was and explained the way. Do you think Lucy is familiar with the area? Linda asked. Yes. I replied. Well, stay where you are. We'll send someone as soon as we can, she said. Completing the conversation, I headed for the house, and as I came out of the workshop I recognized the voice. It was Jack. Well, you're trying to trick us, aren't you? He scoffed. You tried to tell your family you were going south, when in fact you were going north. I climbed into the back seat and met Lucy's mischievous gaze. You thought you could be smarter than us, didn't you? She scoffed. I should have stuck to the plan. Now you're going to pay for it. Mary and Jack laughed at her words. Jack ordered his accomplice to take us to a secluded spot by the creek at the bottom of the hill. Jack signaled for me to get out of the car and handed me the gun. I asked her, "Are you going to kill me?" She laughed. "You know how they say the dead don't talk?" Jack laughed. "I'm happy to spend your money and pretend to mourn your fate," Lucy said. Jack started to give her pleasure and enjoy it. He whispers, "This will be the last thing you see." I turn away, unable to watch Lucy and Jack in their primal act on Earth. I stare at Lucy, unable to comprehend her behavior. I ask her, "Why are you doing this?" She shrugs her shoulders, impassive. What can I say? He has more money than you, more influence than you, and I don't want to be married to a welder for the rest of my life. I need a social life and Jack can provide that. I'm sure you know what happens next, old man. Jack said mockingly. Don't be afraid, it will happen soon. You won't feel a thing. Now atone before God. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer. I could feel Jack's presence. I knew he was raising his sword above his head. Suddenly a gunshot rang out in the air. I opened my eyes just in time to see Jack fall to the ground, followed by another gunshot, and then my accomplice fell to the ground. Mary tried to wrestle the gun away from Jack, but another gunshot rang out, and she collapsed screaming from the pain of the wound in her shoulder. Lucy felt scared and rushed to hide behind Jack. All I could see was a cloud of dust, which was getting closer and closer, and as the car pulled up in front of us I could see long blonde hair flowing behind the driver, and I was sure it was Beverly. She gripped the shotgun tightly and quickly drew a large knife from her belt, cutting the tie that bound my hands, and as soon as I was free I sat down and saw her rush towards Lucy, moving quickly to hit her in the face with the butt of the gun, sending her stumbling and falling on her back to the ground. She shouted, her voice full of authority, "I swear to God, I'm going to blow your head off, do you hear me?" Beverly demanded a firm answer from Lucy, who nodded her head in agreement, fear showing in her eyes. "I am grateful to say that, believe me, you will have the rest of your life to repay you," Beverly replies with a smile. Dave arrived in his lorry. He got out and made sure we were okay. One of the assistants asked for medical assistance and called the coroner. "Are you okay?" Dave asked as he approached us. "Yes, thanks to Bev. She saved my life," I replied gratefully. The ambulance had arrived and the paramedics were treating Mary and Lucy. "She shot Jack and Ronnie," Mary screamed. "Won't you arrest her?" I watched as the assistants handcuffed Lucy and led her out of the room. The sheriff explained that she and Mary would be charged with attempted murder and conspiracy to commit a crime as soon as the authorities had finished gathering evidence and removing the bodies. "We could leave. I was under the impression that you had class today. What happened?" I asked Beverly. "Dave came into McDonald's to give me an update. It made me take time off work to rush home to make sure you were okay." "I can't thank you enough for saving my life," she said happily. I whispered. I called Linda immediately and told her the situation. She was relieved when she knew I was okay. She and Lucy were tried for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit a crime. They were convicted of the initial assault on me and false imprisonment, and both were sentenced to life in prison. They were also charged with conspiracy and racketeering. In both cases they looked disheveled and defeated, which made me smile because neither of them would ever experience freedom again. In addition, she secured a large sum of money for me from Mary and Jack's estate, and although Bernice got her share, I was very happy with mine. The firm also reached an important settlement agreement that dropped a number of federal charges against me and Beverly. A month later, we tied the knot and celebrated with a week-long trip to Las Vegas. I confidently replied, "Are you guys serious?" Beverly then showed her spreadsheet with a detailed business plan she had developed. He asked, "Yes, we thought you had sold the land." I replied, "No, it was a wedding present for you and your parents." He looked at me and said, "It's new and equipped with the latest technology. By the way, the land and the house are registered in your name. Your father and I have removed all of your things from the flat except of course the ones with Lucy's picture on them." I was speechless. Of course I could afford to build a bespoke house, but Dave wasn't listening to anything. The two-family house was impressive and as solid as a traditional timber-framed house, and I wasn't going to be ungrateful as I knew the place must have cost them a fortune. Beverly asked worriedly, "I don't want to see you alone." "I'll be fine," he replied. "I can actually finally get a good night's sleep. I'm tired of listening to you screaming all night long." Dave laughed. "We had a party in the evening, and I called my parents to say thank you for the gift." I couldn't help but feel optimistic about our future. It's true, money attracts friends. Some people associate with people in trouble. Lucy and Mary had a tough time in prison.